On this Friday night, Russia's war plan revealed. New objectives to dominate eastern and southern Ukraine.
They are trying to threaten in order to also push NATO's edges.
And more evidence of atrocities near Mariupol.
International humanitarian law has not merely been ignored, but seemingly tossed aside.
Fair trade.
Reconciliation is not just a word. It is meant to have action. And this is an example of that action.
Why the iconic HBC building in Winnipeg is being handed over to local First Nations. Earth Day and our changing landscape. A stark assessment of a planet in peril and hope we can still save it. And tributes to Canadian hockey legend Guy Lafleur. His larger-than-life presence on and off the ice.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Chris Galis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Russia is outlining new military objectives tonight which could effectively landlock Ukraine. The announcement comes after Russia claims it's defeated Ukrainian forces in Mariupol, although shelling continues there. 120,000 residents are trapped. Outside the war zone, the UN says there is mounting evidence of war crimes, mass graves, and an attempted cover-up. But first, a look at Russia's ambitions after failing to take control of Kyiv and why experts say it'll be hard for President Vladimir Putin to succeed. Redmond Shannon has our top story tonight.
Good Friday in the Eastern Orthodox Church. A blessing for Easter treats prepared for Ukrainian soldiers on the front lines. President Vladimir Zelensky says Russia rejected a proposed Easter truce. There is no let-up around Kyiv. The area near Ukraine's second city saw more deadly shelling, with reports in Russian media that troops seized a Ukrainian arms depot. The Azovstal steelworks, Mariupol's last holdout of Ukrainian forces. The troops and civilians inside apparently reluctant to accept a reported Russian invitation to leave with the promise of safety. Mariupol's mayor again says he believes more than 20,000 people have already died in the city. As Russia's renewed focus on the east intensifies, there are also reports that a Russian commander has stated his army's new list of objectives. To take all of the eastern Donbass region, part of which has been under the control of Russian-backed troops for 8 years, to lock down a land corridor across Mariupol between the Donbass and Crimea, and most notably to further expand control over the Black Sea coast, linking up to the long-time Russian-controlled Transnistria region in Moldova, something that would landlock Ukraine.
It's not an easy military operation. We see how long it takes for Russians even to take Mariupol, something that is right up their nose.
Ukrainian analyst Orysia Lusevich believes Russia is ready to put all of Eastern Europe on notice.
Rhetorically, they are trying to threaten in order to also push NATO's edges.
And if Russia's war expands beyond Ukraine, it will force NATO leaders to think even harder about what they do next. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
The evidence emerging from Mariupol is prompting international outrage, with the UN saying there's evidence of war crimes on a large scale. Tonight, Canada has delivered more lethal aid to Ukraine, including howitzer guns and anti-armour ammunition. And it's renewing calls to expel Russia from the G20. Jackson Proskow reports.
Each new horror revealed in Ukraine serves to further harden the West's resolve against Moscow.
Russia does not have a place at the table of countries who have come together to maintain global economic prosperity.
In Washington, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland called for Russia's expulsion from the G20 after 2 days of international finance meetings in which Canada and other nations walked out on Russian delegates.
Support of Canadian people, which we see right now, is unprecedented. And for that, I want to thank you.
Ukraine's finance minister lauded Canada's efforts, including billions in financial aid, loan guarantees, and military support. Canada is also discussing reopening its embassy in Kyiv, following the lead of several European governments.
We will very shortly next week, reopen our embassy in Ukraine's capital city.
As the battle for Ukraine's future rages in the east, the UN is drawing closer to a firm conclusion that Russia has committed extensive war crimes.
Over these 8 weeks, international humanitarian law has not merely been ignored, but seemingly tossed aside.
Emerging satellite images of mass graves in Mariupol, potentially for thousands of bodies, only add to what the UN says are at least 50 documented cases of unlawful civilian executions in Bucha.
We are very concerned. We're very worried about what's coming next.
The UN Secretary General plans to visit Moscow next week, where he will meet with President Vladimir Putin. He may also visit Kyiv.
He hopes to talk about what can be done to bring peace to Ukraine urgently.
Yet there's little optimism it will do much to bring an end to the conflict, now that Russia has made its intentions so brutally clear. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
One of the most iconic buildings in Western Canada, key to early trading and development in Winnipeg, is being handed over to First Nations. The historic HBC building, once the flagship of the Hudsons Bay Company, will become an arts and retail hub with affordable housing and healthcare too. Brittany Greenslade has the deeply symbolic ceremony that transferred ownership.
For nearly a century, this landmark building has stood tall in downtown Winnipeg, property of the Hudsons Bay Company. At once steeped in Canadian history, but also with deep ties to Western colonization more than 350 years ago.
HBC played a definitive role in the colonization of Canada. The impact of our company's history is not at all lost on me, and it is part of the reason we are all here today.
And taking a step towards reconciling the past. This sprawling 6-story, 655,000 square foot building now transferred from the Hudsons Bay Company to Indigenous ownership.
We can agree that reconciliation is not just a word. It is meant to have action, and this is an example of that action.
HBC built an empire on fur trading. It remains the oldest retailer in North America. But the lucrative fur trade on which the company's first fortune were built had a major impact on Indigenous people. Their lands were opened to European settlement without consultation or consideration for Indigenous sovereignty. Traditional lifestyles and economy were abandoned as many came to rely on the fur trade to survive. Now, including those same pelts and hides in the exchange of power, now carries deeper meaning.
They're really addressing the racism, institutional racism.
That change will come in the form of affordable housing units, office space for Indigenous entrepreneurs, a health center that combines Western and traditional medicines, and a daycare where children will be taught Indigenous languages.
What we're doing here is so important. I know that it's more than just today. It's more than a building. It's about the people in this building. It's about the lives that are going to be impacted over the years.
Lives that are now reclaiming their path forward. Brittany Greenslade, Global News, Winnipeg.
Wait times for some surgeries have been growing in Canada for decades, and the pandemic has made those lists even longer. Some frontline workers say the situation will be catastrophic without immediate intervention. But as Jamie Maracher reports, so far there doesn't appear to be a clear plan.
On days Dr. David Urbach is in the OR, he scrubs into surgery up to 7 times. But he knows all that hard work is doing little to help Ontario's massive surgical pileup.
We've never seen a backlog like this. Ultimately, this is a big public policy risk. Like, how do we ensure that there's confidence in Canadian Medicare and the Canadian health system?
Canada's biggest province estimates the waitlist has grown to between 225 and 250,000 patients over the course of the pandemic. Janet Jones was told she would have to wait up to 3 years just to see a specialist in Toronto. In constant pain caused by endometriosis, the Fredericton resident opted to pay almost $40,000 to have her operation in the U.S. instead.
By the time I waited that 2 to 3 years, it's hard to say what other organs it would have been damaging.
Her province, New Brunswick, is also facing an accumulation of 22,000 patients, up 10% since the pandemic. Only British Columbia has fewer people waiting for surgeries compared to March 2020, down 6%. And about 88,000 people there are at a standstill with their treatments. In 2019, Alberta did implement an initiative to tackle its wait lists with hopes of increasing publicly funded surgeries, contracting to private clinics, and upgrading operating rooms. But COVID put that program on hold. The province has now hired an independent official to oversee the plan, as more than 70,000 Albertans sit on the wait list.
Today's announcement will help repair the damage caused to our healthcare system by the pandemic.
The federal government recently offered up $2 billion to help with the backlogs, but not a single province or territory could tell us how they'll use the money. And most say it's not enough.
When you don't have a clear plan about where you're going and what your goals are, and data and accountability within the system to see if you're driving towards and meeting those goals, you're going to end up with chaos.
Provinces are mulling over long-term solutions such as increased staffing, but that takes years some patients just don't have.
What's happening now are people are going to be waiting. They're going to be suffering for long periods of time instead of being able to enjoy a better quality of life.
Dr. Urbach hopes hospitals will take matters into their own hands, centralizing systems and ensuring surgeries are spread out equally among physicians, maximizing results.
I think we're at a crucial junction right now.
Choosing the wrong path or ignoring the problem could cripple our healthcare system and cost lives. Jamie Morocker, Global News, Toronto.
Starting Monday, the federal government is easing more COVID measures at the border. Unvaccinated children aged 5 to 11 who are traveling with a fully vaccinated adult will no longer need a COVID test to enter Canada. And those who are fully vaccinated, traveling with kids under 12, won't have to provide a quarantine plan, wear a mask, or report any virus symptoms. All travelers must still use the ArriveCan app to upload their travel and vaccination information within 72 hours of arrival. Don't forget that. Celebrating the life of a hockey legend.
All of us of my generation suddenly feel a little bit older today to learn that Guy Lafleur is no longer with us. He was a hero.
The Prime Minister, just one of millions of fans remembering Guy Lafleur as an artist on the ice. And on Earth Day, stark images of our changing planet and what we have to do to save it. In Arizona, 30 homes and other buildings are destroyed after a wildfire ripped through neighborhoods near Flagstaff. Crews are battling half a dozen fires in that region. Firefighters fear winds near 80 kilometers an hour will lead to more catastrophic conditions this weekend. And this is what spring looks like in Calgary today. A snowfall warning was issued this morning with 10 to 15 centimeters expected. Saskatchewan and Manitoba are also bracing for another spring dump this weekend, up to 50 centimeters of snow expected there. Manitoba has issued a flood warning for southern parts of the province as a result. Extreme weather and our shifting climate weighs heavily on scientists and citizens alike. The theme on this 52nd Earth Day is Invest in Our Planet, a challenge for everyone coming out of a global pandemic. Here's Heather Yorix-West with why the need for action is urgent.
On Google's homepage, Earth Day is marked with stark images of the climate crisis. Time-lapse satellite pictures showing glacial retreat at Mount Kilimanjaro, glacial melt in Greenland, coral bleaching at the Great Barrier Reef, and deforestation across Germany. The reality is undeniable. Earth's landscape is changing fast.
The reality is this is happening before our eyes. We know the science, we understand the reason. We just have to have the courage and the collective will to decarbonize.
Canada's landscape is rapidly changing too. Take, for instance, the Place Glacier in the South Coast Mountains in BC. Now watch how it's disappeared since 1965.
We're talking about 60 to 70 meters of lowering on the surface of those ice masses in some cases. And that's ice that's not going to be replenished.
The changing climate isn't just melting Canada's ice. It's heating up our cities as well. A report out this week from the University of Waterloo warns many Canadian cities will face more dangerous extreme heat events like the ones in Quebec and BC that claimed hundreds of lives in recent years.
We basically
see that across Canada, there's 3 zones that are particularly exposed to extreme heat. These are the valleys of BC, the southern prairies, and then the area of the Great Lakes down the St. Lawrence River Valley.
When it comes to our changing climate, the news is often an overwhelming cause for anxiety and, well, bleak. But scientists stress hope is not lost. There is still time to focus our collective efforts to ensure the worst-case scenarios don't become our Earth's future reality. Heather Urix-West, Global News, Calgary.
Just ahead, cash for cars and why yours might be worth a lot more than you think. If you've walked past a car lot lately, you've probably noticed a lot of empty spaces. Inventory is so low, prices for used cars are reaching record highs, up 48% over last year. This week on The New Reality, Mike Drolet reports on the bumpy road and what's ahead for buyers and sellers. Mike.
It's no secret the pandemic and most recently the conflict in Europe has had a detrimental effect on supply lines around the world. The car market in particular is facing a major shift in how it operates. Everything is connected. The automakers can't get the parts to build, which leads to empty lots at dealerships, which in turn pushes buyers to the used car sector, where low supply combined with increased demand has led to topsy-turvy prices, the likes of which nobody has ever seen. One used car dealer in Guelph told us a story about a Ram pickup he sold for $41,900. The guy who bought it put 80,000 kilometers on the odometer and then sold it back to the dealer for $44,000. The third deal for the same car saw it sold for $50,000. Economists don't foresee much change until 2023 at the earliest because the lineup of consumers wanting a new or used car is far too long.
Even if auto manufacturers operate at full speed, operate at 3 shifts per day, 7 days a week, and don't have downtimes, they still won't be able to fully make up for that lost demand or that pent-up demand over the course of 2022.
The unprecedented demand has opened up opportunities for the used car industry to adapt and offer unique buying alternatives for consumers. We'll take you for a ride with some of those disruptors in my report for The New Reality. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Mike. And The New Reality airs tomorrow night at 8 o'clock right here on Global. Just ahead, remembering one of hockey's most electrifying players.
Ladies and gentlemen, Invictus is heading back to North America, and this is a very, very good thing.
Vancouver and Whistler have been selected to host the 2025 Invictus Games in partnership with 4 First Nations. It'll be the game's first ever winter edition. More than 500 wounded and ill military members will compete in adaptive sports. Prince Harry started the Invictus Games back in 2013. Tributes, of course, are pouring in for one of the greatest hockey players of all time. Montreal Canadiens legend Guy Lafleur has died at the age of 70. Premier François Legault says Quebec has lost a giant.
Guy Lafleur was a winner. He was like an artist also. It was spectacular to watch him.
Legault is in talks with Lafleur's family to hold a state funeral so all Quebecers can pay tribute to a hockey hero who left a mark on an entire generation. Eric Sorensen takes a look back at Guy Lafleur's remarkable life.
In either official language,
Robinson à Lafleur.
Guy Lafleur electrified every broadcast
Lafleur.
and in every arena took your breath away.
He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur.
Few fans fully appreciated the daunting challenge Lafleur faced. He was a hockey prodigy in Quebec. As a junior, in one season alone, he scored 130 goals.
From the Quebec Ramparts, Guy Lafleur.
He was drafted by the preeminent NHL franchise in the history of hockey.
When you're a kid, your dream is to eventually play in the NHL and to play with your team, Montreal Canadiens, because they were the best.
The Montreal Canadiens were an unparalleled dynasty. From the mid-40s and for 36 years, the team won as many Stanley Cups as all other clubs combined. From Rocket Richard to Jean Beliveau to Guy Lafleur, he was expected to take up the torch.
I think the expectations were insurmountable. I don't think that anyone could have ever expected anyone to fill the skates of Jean Beliveau.
Of all the hockey heroes, Lafleur may have carried the greatest burden to succeed. His pro career started slowly, but soon he would flower. With hair flowing, the blonde demon, as he was called in Quebec, would be the first to score 50 goals and 100 points 6 seasons in a row. There were too many trophies to count. Coach Scotty Bowman once likened Lafleur's charismatic energy on the ice to Rocket Richard's.
There's only a few that have that aura about them, and I think he was right there, that, you know, you have to watch him every second.
This is my family, and Chevrolet is my family car.
As a hockey idol, Lafleur was featured in commercials.
Yes, and we can get all the help we need at Zellers.
And as a national icon, was satirized on television.
I'm Guy Lafleur. I'm Daryl Sittler, and I use a Daryl Sittler hockey stick.
Lafleur brought particular misery to the Toronto Maple Leafs and to a once unparalleled rivalry in hockey.
Centered in the first and
For Lafleur and the Habs, the championships would keep coming. 5 Stanley Cups in his first 8 seasons.
When Guy Lafleur scored it and the Canadians won, French Quebecers won, French Canadians won. They were representing more than just a team, they were representing a people.
Late in his career, Lafleur retired, then came back to play for the New York Rangers and the Quebec Nordiques. After his playing days, Lafleur's life was laid low for a time by assault charges brought against his son and by his own health problems. But in Quebec, the love and admiration for Lafleur never lost its bloom.
Guy Lafleur turns this place into a frenzy again.
And he never lost his humility or his humanity.
If I look back when I was 8-9 years old, I didn't expect one day to have my sweater retired. To all my teammates, thank you very much for the great thrill.
The Canadiens' championship dynasty lasted nearly 4 decades, a relay from generation to generation, and Guy Lafleur ran the anchor leg.
And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Chris Galis, and tonight we'll leave you with the scene outside of the Bell Centre in Montreal, where fans have been honoring the Canadiens legend all day long. Thanks very much for watching. Colleen Christie will be with you tomorrow. Hope you have a great weekend.